wants them to be a blessing because he blessed them. And we see this in the life of Peter. See, this is what's so cool about this imagery. Peter's using stone in the imagery of a temple, of the Jerusalem temple, right? And he's changing it all, and he's telling you that, you know what? It's alive now, and it's people. And it's always been God's idea that it would be people. And we are the church when we fully surrender our lives to Christ. That's who we are. We represent his identity, and he's building us. He's building these people all over the world, as he always has. But I figure less of us have connected with masonry, and a lot more of us have skipped stones. So I'm using literary license, and that's why we're doing this way today. But what's so cool is Matthew 16:16, if you want to write it down. Matthew 16:16. Jesus is there with Peter. And his name's Simon at the time. And he says, Simon, who do you say I am? And Jesus is asking you, every single person who's ever created, Jesus asks us this question. Who do you say I am? And Peter said, you are the Christ. You are the living stone, capital S. You're the Son of the living God. You are the Messiah. And you know what Jesus says to him? I'm changing your name. Changing your name from Simon to Peter. And he says, on this rock. Now, there's great debate. What's he mean on this rock? Well, it's really clear, actually, if you just dig a little bit. They're standing in Caesarea Philippi beside this huge rock, kind of like Stone Mountain in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's looking at that, and he's reaching out. Jesus is grabbing that, making this imagery, kind of like we're doing today with this stone. And he says, Peter, Petros, means rocky. And he says, on this rock, and I think Jesus is probably doing this, probably hitting his chest, because now he says Petra. And he's not talking about a little stone anymore. He's talking about a foundation. Jesus Christ. He says, on this rock, I will build my church. And that's what Peter, he clears it up for us because he was there. And in his letter to believers scattered throughout Asia Minor, Peter says, you know what? When you surrender your life to Jesus Christ, he changes your identity because he's the living stone, capital S. And when we're in him, when that's who we're designed to be, we reflect him. We're living stones, little s, in everything we do and everywhere we go. The image of God.
If I have one hope this morning, it is that we're able to reconcile this idea of who I am designed to be with a definition of missions, because we're going to talk about that in a second, a very unclear thing sometimes with where we are going as a family as it relates to missions in the world and where we're going to go from here. Missions, I have found in visiting churches and some of the church consulting that I've done, is probably the least understood ministry of a church. If you gather people together and say, what's the youth ministry about here? Or what is children's ministry or the preaching ministry? Or you go into any aspect of that, you all probably can get pretty close to the goal, the purpose, the idea of that. Missions is so easily kind of shoved in a corner or compartmentalized. It's easy to say, you know what, that's for those people who can't live in America. I mean, they're just so spiritual and they're just out there and they just have to go somewhere to live in a hut just to get away from everything. Or you can say, well, missions, I know what that is. That is feeding the poor here in Fort Wayne, or it is campus ministry, or it is unreached people groups. We tend to, mission people, of which I'll put myself in that category, tend to be pretty zealous people. They put a box around it and they say, this is what it is, period. Let's not debate this too much further if you don't mind. When really, it's not an either or, but it is a both and as we look at this. If we look at Mark 12, verses 28 through 31, and we start at this, who am I designed to be? Starting at verse 28, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Those two commandments, love God, love your neighbor, love those who don't know him, I would suggest cannot be really ripped apart. They can't be pulled apart. God desires worship. God desires a relationship with him, not because he's some sort of egotist, not because he enjoys seeing us bow down to him. He does it because he realizes that as we grow closer to him, we become more fulfilled. We understand him better. We understand what our lives are going to be to do as we go from this point. A few years ago, I was in Pasadena, California at the U.S. Center for World Missions, and arrived in L.A., drove up to Pasadena, went to classes, went back to the hotel, went back to the center the next day, classes there all day, and came out of the classroom about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and somebody, while I had been in that class, had dropped a mountain about 200 yards from the center, which I hadn't seen the previous 2 days. The smoke and the fog and all the pollution and all that had been there. For 2 days I'd been walking around this campus and didn't realize we were in a mountain. I mean, I'm not claiming, I can tell you where Uzbekistan is, but I can't tell you that there should be mountains in California, I guess. But 200 yards from this classroom stood this mountain. And to me, that is what worship does. It clears the fog away. It clears the smog away. And we can see as God is sitting there more clearly. John Piper, in his book, Let the Nations Be Glad, brings worship and missions together in this way. He says, missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. Worship is. Missions exist because worship doesn't. Worship is ultimate, not missions, because God is ultimate, not man. When this age is over and the countless millions of the redeemed fall on their faces before the throne of God, missions will be no more. It is a temporary necessity, but worship abides forever. Worship, therefore, is the fuel and goal in missions. It is the goal of the missions because in missions we simply aim to bring the nations into the white-hot enjoyment of God's glory. What is missions? It starts with our worship of Him.
So the idea there is, I think it comes from God. He creates us in His image, is that we become like that whom we worship. So if I worship Jesus Christ with all of my heart and I love Him with all of my heart, then I'm going to reflect Him and be a living stone wherever I go, reflecting the living stone, capital S, Jesus Christ. So who am I designed to be? A living stone, the image of God, fully surrendered in Christ. And Peter showed us that with his life when Jesus said, you know what, I'm changing your name. You're going to be called Rocky now. Well, who I'm designed to be determines what I'm designed to do. Look in verse 5. You also, like living stones, this is who you are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. And here's what priests do. So we're a living stone, we're a priesthood of all believers. Every single person who's ever fully surrendered his or her life to Christ is a priest for Christ. And here's what you do, and I'll explain that. You offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So just as the stone is a living stone, that's what it is, that's who it is, who we are, is thrown into the kingdom waters. That's what we do. We enter the kingdom waters. Write that down. We enter the kingdom waters, and we do one thing. We connect, and we connect two things. This is what a priest did. We connect with God, and we connect Him with others. That was the duty of a priest. That's what a priest does. He's the connection to God and the connection to man. And so, if I enter the kingdom waters, just like that stone, when it connects with that water, I'm connecting with God. I'm connecting with others because it's who I am. That's what I do. And see, a priest, this idea of spiritual sacrifices, what Peter's saying is that the people he's writing to have Jewish backgrounds, and they know that what a priest did is it was a bloody business. It was almost like a butcher. He would sacrifice animals and do all day long they would do that. And why are they sacrificing animals? For what purpose? For sin. For sin. And Peter's saying, you know what? Because of Jesus Christ and dying on a cross and His shed blood, and He proved who He said He was by resurrecting from the dead and provided His Spirit to live through us, we connect with Him. When we enter these kingdom waters, when we know who we are and we know that we're designed to enter the kingdom waters, it's what we do. We connect with God through maybe reading the Bible, through prayer, and we connect Him with others through serving them. Write that down, serving them. That's how we connect Him with others, through serving them. And so, if you're a mom, you know what? And you're in Christ, you're fully surrendered to Him, that's who you are, you're a living stone. You enter those kingdom waters when you connect God to your children. If you're a dad, and you're a living stone, and you enter the kingdom waters and you're fully surrendered in Christ, you connect God with others when you rear your children in His Word.